Hello and welcome to my first ever Redstone video. Today we are going to be making a boat elevator with full floor selection. The version I'm making is for 6 floors, so there will be a 22 floor version in the world download. You can't actually have more than 22 floors because you need at least 17 blocks between each floor, and with all the maths it works out as 22 being the maximum. You can row into the elevator, row out of the elevator, call it from whatever floor it is on. This thing is fully functional. And on the screen right now is the timings where each section begins in the video. There's also links down in the description to make it easy to jump to where you want to. So, without any further ado, let's get started. For this build, you will need a space that is 13 blocks across and 40 blocks deep. Realistically, your hole only needs to be 12 blocks across, assuming you're digging a hole for this to go into, because this last row is only being used for blocks to hold in water. There's no actual things going on here, so you have a little bit of leeway there. Now down below I have a couple of chests. In this chest is everything you will need for the actual elevator itself. That's 14 slime blocks, 14 honey blocks, 6 sticky pistons, 6 observers, 2 composters, 6 blocks and 16 slabs of your choice. Next to it is everything you need for one floor. Obviously the top and bottom floors will be different and there will be extra blocks between the floors. But we have 314 redstone dust, 90 repeaters, 29 comparators, 25 redstone torches, 5 redstone blocks, 8 dispensers, 8 droppers, 30 observers, 125 hoppers, 14 pistons, 36 sticky pistons, 24 slime blocks, 14 targets, 1 lever, 1 minecart with hopper, 8 powered rail, 1 regular rail, 2 pressure plates, 3 soul sand, 50 ice, which we're going to be using for water, 20 packed ice, 3 signs, 6 chests, 2 barrels, 1 composter, 2 obsidian, and 3 scaffolding. You'll also need 473 blocks and 20 slabs of your choice, 351 glass and 19 glass panes, as well as 245 blocks for the elevator shaft. I'll go through what those can be later. I'm also going to be using coloured blocks for the tutorial and in the world download to make it easier to differentiate between the different systems. Then there's 297 paper and 28 sticks for filling various hoppers and barrels with. Well, that's all of the materials out of the way. Let's look at the elevator itself. So, the bottom layer of the elevator is built in 2 halves, one connected by 4 slime blocks and the other with 4 honey blocks. On either side we have observers facing into sticky pistons pointing up. This makes one part of the engine. Going up a layer, at the front we have the other part of the engine. We'll take a look at the back in a moment. Once again we have observers facing into sticky pistons, but this time they are going to be pointing down. We also have our sticky blocks on the outside so that they don't stick to the bottom layer, and a couple of filler blocks on the inside. These filler blocks are important, so make sure they're in there, because with the filler blocks, as it's going up, we have the piston push limit of 12. At the back we then have a couple of composters. Mine are full, but as long as they're not empty, they will be fine. For this, you need a movable block that can give off a signal from a comparator, so you can also use a filled cauldron if you wish. That's your other option. Once again, we have our sticky blocks on the outside so that they don't stick to the bottom layer, and some filler blocks to go towards that push limit. Do note that the sticky blocks alternate between honey and slime. This is because while the bottom layer is built in 2 halves, the other layers are built in 4 quadrants. This becomes more obvious on the 3rd layer, where we have 2 by 2 blocks of honey and slime to connect the blocks in their quadrant together, and then our 4th and final layer is a layer of slabs. We use slabs because they can be waterlogged, so we can fill them up to row in and out of the elevator. Once the slabs move, whether they're moving up or down, that water will disappear. So we aren't left with water filling the elevator shaft as we would be if we just had water on top of regular blocks. From here we can make a start on the orange line, which is our upwards break. To activate the line we have a comparator detecting the composter through the shaft wall. As you can see, when the elevator has stopped, the composter will actually be 1 block above the comparator. That's because the comparator detects it as it is passing by. Now let's get rid of the elevator and the footprint so we have a less obstructed view. That's better. So these shaft walls, they need to be made from a block that won't stick to the slime and honey blocks, but that a comparator can detect stuff through. So, as well as the glazed terracotta that I'm using, You could also use moss blocks, melons, pumpkins, as well as carved pumpkins and jack-o'-lanterns, obsidian, crying obsidian, sculpt catalysts, or, if you are particularly rich, lodestones. But let's go back to the glazed terracotta for the rest of this build. Off of the comparator, we have a block that leads into a 2-tick repeater. This then leads into 4 dust and a 4-tick repeater, which turns on a piston that pushes out over the comparator. This will update the comparator because for some reason it stays on even after the elevator has passed, so we need to reset the line some way or another. This line then gets diverted by a target block off of which we have another repeater, this time on 1 tick. This goes up to power 2 sticky pistons, which will push out 2 blocks. The elevator will try to take these blocks up as well, but as mentioned earlier, when it's going up, we're at that 12 block push limit. So this is going to make it 13 blocks, and it's not going to be able to push any further, so everything comes to a nice stop. Now that we've stopped it going upwards, we also need to stop it going down, for which we use the light blue line. It starts off exactly the same as the orange line, but 4 blocks up. The comparator detects a passing composter. It goes into a 2-tick repeater that leads into a 4-tick repeater that activates a piston, updating the comparator, exactly the same. From here, though, we take the line down past the orange line, using 2 1-tick repeaters and a piece of glass to prevent different lines from activating each other. There's a lot of that involved here because there's a lot of redstone quite close together. This then leads into a comparator pulse extender across a couple of levels, which will turn off the torch at the bottom. That leads into 2 pieces of dust with a 2-tick repeater in between. They get diverted by target blocks with torches on top of them, creating a nice double piston extender. So we have a sticky piston that pushes out the regular piston, which extends. Extended pistons can't be pushed, so when the elevator hits them, it will come to a stop. Then that piston retracts and is pulled back into place by the sticky piston. Once the elevator stops, we need to fill it with water, which is where the lime line comes in. This starts at the end of the orange and light blue lines because it needs to activate after the brakes. We take a 1-tick repeater from the orange line, which leads to a target block with a torch on it. The light blue line goes up a bit of glass into a 4-tick repeater and then into that same target block. On one side, we have another torch on the target block down to a piece of redstone dust that activates a 3rd redstone torch just to drop the signal down a few blocks. This goes into a 4-tick repeater which activates a regular piston pushing across a redstone block. That redstone block goes into a line diverted by target blocks into 4 4-tick repeaters to a row of upward-facing pistons. We need to use target blocks and not have the redstone line going right up to the repeaters because of another line that's going to be going in underneath. And this line of pistons holds back the water that's leading up to the elevator. So once the elevator arrives, they drop down so you can row in or out. Essentially, these pistons are the elevator doors. Next to them, we have 2 rows of dispensers, each of which holds a bucket of water. Above the earlier target block, we also have a line coming off of a redstone torch. On one side, it goes into a 1-tick repeater, and on the other, it goes into 4 4-tick repeaters. Both of these then go into a 4-tick pulse limiter using a sticky piston. The longer one then goes into a 1-tick repeater as well. These both activate a line of downwards facing sticky pistons, which push observers down to activate the dispensers via the elevator shaft. They get pushed down twice, once to dispense the water and then again to refill the buckets. When building the shaft, you need to keep the block in front of the frontmost observers empty, or the dispenser activates a 3rd time. I don't know why this happens. I cannot explain it, but it does happen. Just keep that block empty. If you do find out why it happened and have found a fix for it, let me know down in the comments. Now, of course, I only want the elevator to stop at its intended destination. So often it will be passing by floors and I won't want the brakes to activate. That's where this pink line comes in. It is the brake activation line, the simplest of lines in this build. There's a long section at the back from which it's going to be activated by various things. And it's got a 1-tick repeater on either side. It then activates 2 sticky pistons which will push blocks forwards and back to allow the signals to pass for the brakes. Of course, the reset lines at the back will still activate, but we need them to do so to make sure those comparators get turned back off. So far, we have 4 lines in place, and they are all about stopping the elevator. Let's get it moving with the yellow line, which is for getting it started going up. First of all, we have a slightly hooked section hanging off of the back. This is for other lines to activate it. Then we have 3 4-tick repeaters going off to the left, which will match the total delay on the other side and also allow time for the elevator door to activate. They turn on a couple of pieces of redstone dust, which will activate 2 observers facing up and in turn 2 facing into the shaft. So they are activating 2 pistons on the other side of the elevator shaft. Going around the outside, you see 4 1-tick repeaters positioned so that the line doesn't interfere with the others again. Then 2 4-tick repeaters leading to the same thing, so that's that same 12 ticks of delay. We need to make sure it's the same so that when the elevator gets set off, it all goes at the same time. Out the front, we also have an extra section leading to 2 1-tick repeaters that activate a piston. This pushes the redstone block that was placed earlier, activating the elevator door. On the other side of this block, we have the magenta line, which will send the elevator downwards. For space purposes, this line actually has to pass right through the elevator shaft wall, so for me, I have it placed on some scaffolding. You need a block that you can put redstone dust on, but it won't be powered by the redstone dust, and it won't be moved by the elevator, and there are only 2 other options. One of them is hoppers, which we try to reduce because they can cause lag, and the other option is beacons, which would be just a really weird use of beacons. So scaffolding, I feel, is the safest bet. Going back along the line, we have 2 1-tick repeaters so that it doesn't get activated by the light blue line's redstone torches. This leads us to the main part of the magenta line running over a hopper that we'll get to in a bit. This goes alongside the orange line with 2 4-tick repeaters, which are once again strategically placed to not interfere with things. That's what this whole section's all about. I tried to make the redstone nice and tight. This line then activates an observer that will activate a piston on the other side of the shaft wall, same as the yellow line did. Now that we have systems in place to start and stop the elevator, it is time to start tying them together. On the approach to the elevator, we have 2 barrels. In the first one, you will need something to represent each of the floors. I'm using named pieces of paper. As you can see, they're named floor 1, floor 2, floor 4, floor 5, and floor 6, because I'm making this to be the 3rd floor, so we don't need that piece of paper in the barrel. You can use whatever you want as long as it can stack, but I'm going to keep referring to them as pieces of paper for my own convenience. Whoever is using the elevator will take out the piece of paper for the floor they want to get to and put it in the 2nd barrel. So now we need to get a hopper line out from there, going through the magenta line as shown earlier, so we can start to process that piece of paper. So initially, that piece of paper is going to get stopped by the cyan line, which is the cool elevator line. We have a redstone torch with some dust on a hopper to lock it, allowing no item to pass through. Once an item is there, it gets picked up by the comparator, which leads into a 1-tick repeater that activates a small line of redstone. This gets diverted into 2 target blocks, activating chains of sticky pistons going up and down. The upward ones have a line of slime blocks, then a redstone block, then an air gap before the next sticky piston, so when they push up, that redstone block will activate the next sticky piston, and it will send that signal all the way up. The ones going down are similar, but you need a piece of redstone dust on that sticky piston, so the redstone block is going to be 2 spaces up. How many you need and how long they need to be will depend on the distance between your floors, so you're going to need to experiment and figure that out for yourself. But these activate the magenta lines of every floor above via a piece of obsidian, and the yellow lines of every floor below via the sticky pistons themselves, so that whatever floor the elevator is on, it is going to start heading towards your floor. The line also extends in the other direction through a 1-tick repeater to activate the pink line, turning the brakes on at the floor you are on. When the elevator arrives, the signal from the light blue or orange reset line gets sent through a 1-tick repeater, 1 for each line as you can see, which will turn the torch off and allow the piece of paper to continue along the hopper line. However, if the elevator is already on the correct floor, so you don't need to call it, the cyan line will do nothing and the piece of paper will just stop there and not get processed. And that is not what we want. So here we're going to introduce the brown line, which is going to act as a bypass. So first of all, let's extend that hopper line and we'll add another one underneath, which is going to take the piece of paper before it can reach the cyan line. Once it reaches the end of the new line, it will go into an auto dropper, which uses a comparator, sticky piston, and 2 observers, and is going to put it back into the main line. This will get activated by a composter, or again a cauldron will work if that's what you choose to use. That goes through a comparator and 3 1-tick repeaters with a block between each repeater and another block at the end. So while the composter is down like it currently is, that hopper will be locked, and the piece of paper will pass straight across it into the cyan line, but if the composter is up, the item can pass through the brown line instead. To switch between these two states, we're going to be using the break reset lines once again, because that's going to allow us to know, is the elevator on this floor? How is it going to tell us that? Well, there's a break on either side of each floor. So if they activate twice, it means that the elevator has just gone past, but if they only activate once, it means the elevator has arrived, and then when they activate again, it means that the elevator has left. So we can use this to make sure we know exactly where the elevator is at any time. So of course, when you are setting this up, whatever floor you build the actual elevator itself on, make sure you have the composter in the up position. So at this point, we now need to know, where are we going from here? Are we going up or are we going down? And we get help for that from the purple line. If you're going to be doing more than 6 floors, the purple line is going to look very different, but you can find that version in the download. But for now, let's look at the 6th floor version. The hopper line is going to continue into an auto dropper that is facing into a minecart with hopper on an unpowered powered rail. Inside that minecart, you will want one named piece of paper for every floor above the current one. But make sure the other slots are filled as well, but only with one item in each slot. It has to be only one item in each slot, and they all have to be stackable items. The top observer is facing into a bit of redstone dust with a 4-tick repeater going into a block to power that rail. Beneath the second dropper is a hopper, powered by a redstone torch. The purple line goes round and through 2 4-tick repeaters to turn that torch off. And if the piece of paper doesn't match what's in the minecart, it won't go past the second dropper. And once the torch turns off, the hopper can pick it up and take it away. That piece of paper will then go into an auto dropper, which currently leads nowhere, but we'll come back to that in a moment. But the top observer from that auto dropper will also activate a line which has a 2-tick repeater leading into a 2 observer pulse extender. And that leads into a 1-tick repeater on the other side, which leads into a second 1-tick repeater that activates the magenta line. That's because if the minecart with hopper only has paper for the floors above and the piece of paper can't go in, it has to be for the floor below, so we activate the magenta line to send the lift down. Now let's have a look at what the minecart's going to be doing during this time, because that rail was powered, so the minecart is going somewhere. And once that line is powered, it's going to travel along a series of sorters, 5 for the minecart with hopper, 27 if you're using the minecart with chest for more floors. These are bog standard sorters, a comparator leading into 3 dust which activates a 1-tick repeater, briefly turning off the redstone torch on the other side. The top hoppers will contain 41 of each of the items that are in the minecart, and 4 filler items, 1 in each of the other 4 slots. I use sticks for these. This will remove 1 of each type of item from the minecart. They will then travel along the hopper line into another auto dropper, which will put them into a bubble column, lifting them into another hopper, which will return them to the minecart, resetting that little purple line. However, if a piece of paper has been put into that minecart, it's going to be left over and dropped off in that last hopper at the end. This can only be for a floor above, so we need to send the elevator up. This piece of paper will once again go into an auto dropper, which currently leads to nowhere. The top observer is once again going to activate a 2-tick repeater, going into a 2 comparator pulse extender with a couple of 1-tick repeaters, but this time activating the yellow line. So where did those earlier auto droppers lead? The blue line is going to tell the system what floor we are going to, but we've just sent the elevator off, so we need to do it quickly it becomes a little bit of a race. If we are going up, the piece of paper is going to be put into a series of spiralling bubble columns, 2 on each floor. As the paper moves forward, it will hit a couple of chests that will align it so that it passes over the edge of a hopper. This hopper is another sorter looking for pieces of paper that are named for the floor we are currently on. The hoppers will look the same as the sorters in the purple line: comparator, 3 bits of dust, repeater, torch. On the other side, we have a very similar setup, but instead of a series of spiralling bubble columns, we have a series of spiralling drop shafts. With floors that are further apart, you'll want to make sure that the bubble columns and drop shafts do stretch the entire distance, much like with the sticky pistons going up and down earlier. Once the paper has found the matching floor and gone into the hoppers, the 2 hopper lines converge on a hopper locked by a torch. A comparator with a 1-tick repeater detects the item and sends a signal across the blue line and a piece of obsidian because it's going between those 2 slime blocks. And it's then going into a 2-tool torch tower, which is going to activate the pink line, turning the brakes on at the intended floor. Once the elevator arrives, the brake reset lines get used again because they're a really useful feature of this build. This time we have a 1-tick repeater coming off of the brown line that travels down and turns off the redstone torch, unlocking the hopper and allowing the item to continue into the reset line, which is going to be the last part. The hoppers lead into one more auto dropper, which fits a bit of paper into a drop shaft that goes right to the bottom floor, which then gets moved by some water into a bubble column, going all the way up to the top floor. I'll show this move across that water stream later, because I'm going to be showing you what changes for the top floor and what changes for the bottom floor. Remember that, like the blue line, the 2 shafts need to extend between those floors as well, also like those sticky pistons mentioned earlier. At the top, you will see the start of the hopper line, which will lead back into the first barrel, but we have to get the piece of paper into that hopper line out of the bubble stream. Just above that hopper line, we have 2 sticky pistons, one which is going to push a block into the bubble stream, blocking the path of the paper, and another to pull a block away, which is going to cause the top bit of the bubble stream to flow out, so when the piece of paper gets stuck by the block, it will get pushed as well and flow into the hopper stream. Of course, once that's been done, we then have a break in the bubble stream. So we need to have 2 water sources on either side, which are going to fill up into an infinite water source so that the bubble stream doesn't get permanently broken. That top piston is being activated by 2 1-tick repeaters, while the bottom one gets activated by a redstone torch coming off the main line. So when one of them is extended, the other one is retracted. This line goes back to a redstone block between 2 regular pistons. The line gets turned on from the purple line whenever the dropper tries to put a piece of paper into the minecart, because this is something that is going to happen every time the lift is used, and it's nice and close to the red line, so it's a simple way to activate everything. Once the paper is in the hopper stream, a comparator is going to pick it up, go through a 1-tick repeater to activate the other piston, which is going to turn the line back off, so that part of the system then gets reset. And then the final step is to make that hopper line reach the first barrel. At this point, we can fill in the rest of the elevator shaft, remembering to leave gaps for the braking systems and that gap in front of the observers. And now, one floor is complete. Let's take a look at how the top floor is different and the bottom floor is different. Starting with the top floor. Once you're at the top, going up is not an option. So we can get rid of the yellow line, which sends the elevator up, and we can get rid of the light blue line, which stops the elevator if it's coming from above. But do remember, there's a yellow block at the front, which is also used by the magenta line, so keep that in place. We can also get rid of the red line, because if the piece of paper has managed to make it all the way to the top of that bubble column, well, that's the only place it can go to. So we can have that hopper stream, but we don't need all of the redstone above it. As well as this, the minecart system can get removed, as that's only checking for floors above. And also we're going to reach the top of the bubble columns and drop shafts of the blue line. On the bottom floor, we've reached the bottom of the bubble columns and drop shafts for the blue line, so we can cap those off as well. We also have that little bit of water at the bottom of the red line, which was mentioned earlier, as well as the soul sand for that bubble column. The minecart system is still needed, but now it has to go up, so the hopper beneath that second dropper, with the torch next to it, that's not needed. And we can get rid of that little bit of the purple line as well. We can also get rid of the magenta and orange lines as they are starting the elevator going down or stopping the elevator from coming from below. And that is the bottom line complete. So once you've got that all done, you can put all of your floors together, and that is it, a working boat elevator. Let's see it in action. We are going to see this in action twice. First of all, so you get to experience it as you would be experiencing it, and then we'll run it again and watch the redstone in the background. So we're on the 3rd floor. The lift is currently on the bottom floor, so let's go to floor 2. So this is now going to be processed. The first thing we should hear is the brakes being activated, and we can kind of just see them off to the side with that. Yeah, you saw that doesn't extend, definitely. And then it takes a little while because it's on the bottom floor, but soon we should also hear the lift coming up towards us. Hopefully. There we go. I hear it now. So then it stops on our floor. We can row in. It's going to give enough time for other people to get in as well, which is just the processing time. And then we're going to descend down to the 2nd floor. So that's it in action. Then we're just going to get out. And I think we'll go from the 4th floor. On the 3rd floor, though, we should see in a moment the piece of paper return. Again, it takes a little while because the hopper stream, but there it is. There's a bit of paper. Now let's do it floor 4 to floor 3, and we shall watch the redstone. That's floor 2. Floor 3. So it goes through, it's going to get caught by that hopper, and that line's going to activate. There we go. So that was the brakes activating as well. And then everything below has been activated, everything above. So the lift will be on its way. See? And then once that arrives, we should see, it's going up, so we should see the orange line activate. Lovely. Then that moves forward, get processed over here. Which it does. That's also turned on the red line. And it's started to send it down to the 3rd floor. So as it's going down, it should be activating the light blue brake. The brakes are on. And the brakes are activated. And then that piece of paper gets spat out. It's going to flow up to this floor. Which hopefully we'll be able to see. So obviously, the higher up the floor is, the longer that process will take. And clearly we missed a bit of paper, which isn't too surprising inside a glass column. But that has now returned to its barrel. And the elevator is on the 3rd floor. So that is it. That is a working boat elevator. As I said, there will also be a 22-floor version in the world download, which will be down in the description. But in the meantime, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the boat elevator. My name is Wade and Bearded, and I will see you all next time.